This is part 5 of I Hope You Die Soon, Words on Non-Duality. The seeker cannot help seeing liberation as magical and creating fantastical imaginings about it. We yearn for the gifts that we think liberation will bring. This may make us pray to every passing guru, spiritual teacher, and mantra salesman. But in liberation, it is seen that liberation is entirely ordinary, but also wonderful. This is a paradox. The seeing of liberation is simply everyday life, the squirrel on the tree trunk, with the veil of seeking taken away. The roller coaster ride of the neurotic mind becomes a gentle wonderment. But the mind may not like the loss of its neurosis. Thoughts create the appearance of there being a person who has a mind. For the self-conscious seeker, many of these thoughts may be about finding out who I truly am. But the apparent person who seems to be having these thoughts does not exist, and thought itself cannot discover its own nature. It has no nature to discover. In liberation, it is seen that thoughts arise from emptiness, from nothing and from nowhere. They simply arise and fall away. Thoughts do not go anywhere, and they do not lead to anything. They have no significance. Depending on the patterned nature of the body-mind, opinions, leanings, prejudices and beliefs may all still arise when liberation is seen, but it is unlikely that they will be taken seriously. Awakening is seeing the emptiness of the void. Liberation is seeing the fullness of the void. Contraction and localization. In the explosion that is the seeing of liberation, contraction ends. This is not to say that the experience of a contracted person cannot return, because anything is possible in liberation. But there is a strong tendency for contraction not to occur once liberation is seen. However, localization, the sense of there being a body-mind in a particular place, is different to psychological and emotional contraction. For this body-mind, when liberation was seen, any sense of localization ended for a while. Awareness was seen to be everywhere. The room in which standing was happening, the street in which there was walking, the bodies and lampposts and benches and space that were appearing were not differentiated in their belonging from this arm, this thinking process, this seeing, these feet walking the pavement. There was no sense of anyone walking past anything or through any space. Yet it was noticed that the body was able to negotiate apparent space and time without colliding with either walls or the future. Sometime later, the sense of localization returned, and it was felt once more that there was a body occupying a space-time dimension. But the sense of contraction that had been a constant part of this life, even after awakening, was gone. With liberation comes the seeing that there is only unconditional love, arising as everything that is. There can be no explanation for this, although the mind will look for one. It simply is so. When I am seen as everything, there can be no possibility in that seeing except to realize that everything is love. Death and religion. Question: how do you find out what happens after death? Answer: you ask someone who has died. Last night I dreamt that I was having dinner in a restaurant with an old friend. We asked for the bill, but before it came I woke up. So did my friend have to pay my share of the bill? It is easy to see that the question about my dream is absurd. It is the same with the question, what happens to me after death? The question dissolves when it is seen that I am a dreamed character. Then it is seen that there is no me who dies, no after, because time is created only in the dreamed mind, and no death, because death is simply the awakening from the dream. If there were anyone who could choose not to worry, I would say, don't worry, it will be all right. But the mind cannot imagine its own annihilation. Faced with the appearance of death in the dream, the mind creates stories about its own continued existence after death. All of these stories are like answers to the question, who pays the restaurant bill of the dreamer who wakes up before the bill arrives? We are all familiar with so many of these stories. Most offer some variation of reward for a life well lived, however that is conceived, and punishment for a life of evil doing. They are both seductive and intimidating, alternately promising us spiritual riches and threatening us with dire torments. In fact, there are billions of these stories because each one is unique to the particular dreamed character who holds it. My version of salvation through the blood of the Lamb will be different to yours. Your version of taking rebirth as a god, a human, an animal, a hungry ghost, or a demon will be different to that of the Buddhist meditator sitting next to you. In most of the stories that the mind spins around death, there are a few common themes. There are rules to be obeyed. There is effort to be made. There are bad actions to be avoided and good ones to be carried out. There are rewards to be earned by following the instructions of the pastor, priest, lama, guru, yogi or swami. Buddha or Jesus or Krishna may be invoked to justify these rules. There are threats of future punishments, often of extreme torture, to encourage you to keep to the path. In some versions of these stories, for example the cruelest amongst the Christian ones, these punishments last for all eternity. In other, slightly more compassionate versions, like some within Buddhism, they only last for an unimaginably long time. In some of these stories, you do not have to murder a convent of nuns or go to a drug-crazed orgy to destroy your chances of a blissful afterlife. For some people, simply dancing on a Sunday will do that. The structure of some minds can even manifest the appearance of ghouls, ghosts, spectres and spirits. This helps to persuade the mind that it will continue after death. For many seekers, the most seductive of the stories about death is the story of karma and rebirth. This appeals particularly to the mind which likes justice, because this story makes everything seem just, and so personal suffering appears more bearable. The story of karma is the story that each of my actions and thoughts bear fruit exactly according to its nature. Clearly, this is not the case in this lifetime, for the evil are often seen to prosper and the saintly to suffer. So the story of karma usually includes the story of rebirth. Every apparent injustice is explained and swept away by this story, from deformities at birth to the billions amassed by despots, to the broken leg as someone unexpectedly trips and falls down the stairs. To the mind, this story is extremely satisfying. If my abuser prospers in this life, he will suffer in another when he is reborn as a toad. If my self-sacrificing goodness and asceticism goes unrewarded in this life, at least I will attain a favourable rebirth. Perhaps I will have an enhanced golden aura, which will attract followers to whom I can teach the attainment of enlightenment. The idea of karma and rebirth develops from a person's belief in volitional action. Volitional action is the choice to do something, to exercise free will. When it is seen that there is no one, it is seen that there is no possibility of volitional action. There is no one who makes any choice of any kind. Cause and effect fall away when it is seen that all apparent actions simply arise without volition out of nothing. However, if we want an explanation of personal suffering that will satisfy the mind, there is an enormous storehouse of religious beliefs that we can choose from. There are enough religions to suit everybody's tastes, from the most ascetic to the most luxuriant. We can dress ourselves in hair shirts and whip ourselves with flails, or put on scarlet robes and feast our eyes on golden statues. We can revere celibate men who instruct us on how we should conduct our sex lives, or look forward to a paradise where we can watch gleefully as our enemies burn in hell. There are even secular religions like saving the planet or socialism. Or we can combine the secular and the spiritual and invent our own religion, such as transcendental politics or psychotherapeutic Buddhism or tantric green environmentalism. Any religion may be able to satisfy our desire for meaning and purpose and offer an explanation for personal suffering, none of this has anything to do with liberation. What happens at death cannot be understood until there is no one to understand it.